So this has already been released, but it is working more in a beneficial way. Now the AIs, apparently the reptilians are allied with the AI, and their bodies are completely saturated by these tiny nanites. But the Greys used to be slaves to the reptilians, from what I understand. They broke away. The whole AI thing is interesting when you start looking at autism, because if you take a human child and make them catatonic through all these injections you give them, an AI system like this could easily infiltrate their body, connect where they need to, and run the body. Give them a vessel, sort of.
Certainly. It would make it easier. And if you've seen the film The Accountant, which just came out a short while ago on video, where Ben Affleck does a great job playing this kid that has autism, and then he learns how to be essentially a rogue super soldier, and the abilities that he had is incredible. And if you have autism, your sensory perception is different. Therefore, like, you can't feel things as much as somebody else. It's almost like if you are, let's say you're holding your own hands. It's almost like you're holding hands with mittens on, because the nervous system gets damaged from the chemicals in the vaccine. So absolutely, I can see that. And I also wonder if they do this on mass scales to maybe pull out 100 savants out of 100,000 people that they physically damage, and mentally and spiritually. The vaccine agenda, there's a multiple line of reasons for it, I feel. Oh, and get this, just while we're at vaccines, the MMR vaccine, there was a recent study released, and I will actually release this data here shortly. 2,000 plus parts per billion of glyphosate in the MMR vaccine. 2,000 parts per billion. You know what glyphosate is? It's Roundup. That means you're literally injecting yourself with Roundup. You're injecting babies with Roundup. Welcome to the New World Order. They love you so much. Sorry. Continue. It makes me so mad. I mean, it's just unbelievable.
Yeah, and that's why I'm like, well, we're making some headway, but these people, they're still very powerful and in very powerful positions. So draining the swamp's going to take a little longer, I think. One of the things I wanted to connect Planet X with, because we started talking about that. This, going back 12,000 years, again, 12,000 years, everything always goes back to 12,000 years, that the major damage that took place. To, let's say our world exploded, right, and blew up. Somebody blew it up. And we're right on the edge of the section that, gets blown out into space. Well, the atmosphere is gone, and space is incredibly cold, so you're subjected to the space without the warmth of Earth around or anything else around, and you would literally flash freeze because of the temperature from space, how cold it is. And that's the only way I would see that something could flash freeze. I don't see any other way you could do it. There was that movie, The Day After Tomorrow, with those gigantic vortexes that allowed the outer space temperatures to drop in because they weren't being pushed back, sort of like a reverse vacuum, and brought the cold temperatures down. And in that movie, they portrayed people just kind of taking a breath and just freezing in place. There's also that fox down, and something similar to that happened over in Russia. There was a fox crossing a stream. You can see his nose out of the ice, and his eyes and ears out of the ice, and the tip of his tail out of the ice, but the rest of him is in the ice. So he was swimming across the stream, and that flash froze. That was back when we were first experiencing those polar vortexes they speak of. So these beings, there were quite a few beings here on this world, but according to what they call the Muhammad Accord, something they signed back in the 16th century, or actually 6th century, they're not supposed to show themselves anymore. They're supposed to remain hidden and just kind of allow humanity to see what would play out, kind of hide in the shadows, the hidden hand sort of thing, to run the world that way.
Uh-huh.
And that's kind of what they've been doing. So they've just stayed in the back, see where we'd go. And apparently, because of all the pedophile stuff coming out and all the attention being drawn upon them, they're kind of shine the spotlight over in that direction. Hey, look over here. And, oh, this is so important and monumental, we just need to put this pedophile stuff aside and we'll get back to it later, which they never will. What they want to do is basically put us in a bigger box. Inside the box we're in right now, there's no such thing as aliens, off-world, or life from other worlds. In this bigger box that they want to put us in, there were a type of humanoid on Earth or possibly Mars that was very advanced, Their world was destroyed. They came here to Earth and eventually got flash frozen down. And the South Pole, they'll probably claim it was some sort of pole shift. And we got mixed with them in the breeding, just natural selection sort of thing. And then humanity sort of came out of that, is what they're planning to do. They want to spread out the technology release over 100 years so that by the time the disclosures happen, everybody will be dead, the ones who committed all these atrocities against humanity, so they won't be held accountable. Anyway, that's their plan. I don't think it'll work because there's other plans in the works. But that's kind of what's taking place down there and why they're releasing this information right now. The thing that gets me, though, is Planet X is a very big part of Christianity. People just don't realize that. When they speak in Revelation of the red dragon, that's Planet X. It's got the wings, got the long red tail, and it's red, and looks like fire. And when you start looking at the symbolism and what they're describing that this thing does, it is Planet X. David Meade pretty much points to it being Planet X when he figured out that Virgo in September 23rd will have Jupiter in its womb area for 42 weeks at that point. And in the actual writings where it says the woman illuminated by the sun, it doesn't exactly say the sun. She's illuminated. Something is illuminating this constellation. The moon's at her feet, and she's about to give birth. You've interviewed David Meade a while back, right?
Yeah, matter of fact, that was the first interview that I did on Planet X, and that's got over 450,000 views. That was a really good show with David. I need to get a hold of him again.
Yeah, no, he's incredible. The research he did. I tried to get a hold of him, and I sent him an email telling him that his date is off. I think he's like 3,800 years ago as opposed to 3,600 years ago. And the only reason I explained that it was off was because during that passage of Planet X, it introduced Venus back into our system. It had Venus in its gravity well, took it with it during the destruction of Tiamat, and it was reintroduced at that time. The Mayans record this as happening. Velikovsky mentions that Venus was never mentioned before this. And Venus finally settled into orbit, and when it settled into orbit between Earth and the Sun, it sort of pushed Earth back a little bit and gave us 5 additional days to our calendar. All the ancient calendars are 360 days. And
oh, man, I got to jump in on that real quick. I was thinking about that just the other day when I broke down the New Jerusalem, and I mean, to a T, literally, the size of it, I was able to put together the amount of square feet that each person would have left if you took 144,000, and the 12 was constantly going back, and then the 360. So I'm just interjecting here real quick, and please continue, but I was thinking that the past few days about how I'm wondering why they changed from 360 days to 365, and another thing that I've been thinking a lot about lately as well is the asteroid belt, and was there a planet at one point in time that got smashed by something, and now that's the asteroid belt. So once again, I apologize for interrupting, but I just wanted to throw that in real quick.
Yeah, that's a planet I call Tiamat. Some people pronounce it Tiamat. Some call it Phaeton. There's several names for it. And they said that they don't think there was enough matter there to create a planet that size, but that's because most of it was blown out into space. The comets all come from there. It was a water world. And a lot of the debris was taken into the gravity well of Nibiru as it passed by, well, Planet X as it passed by. And the remains of it are what's called the hammered bracelet. It's the asteroid belt. But they have actually, with satellites and telescopes, been able to detect clay on these asteroids. You can't get clay on asteroids that never formed into a planet because that requires tidal forces, water, pressure, and erosion of the soil to create the clay. But these have clay on them. Also, they're all orbiting on their axis in the same direction. So that was part of that world. And we're part of that world. Earth is part of what once was that world. And when Earth finally sort of stabilized, the calendar was 360 days. I always wondered why 360. Why can't I just make a nice 400-degree circle, 100 degrees in each corner instead of 90? Because the calendar was that way, 360 degrees. You got 90 days for each of the seasons because we had 4 seasons. And the Earth was on its axis. And on Tiamat, there were no seasons. It never rained before that time. There was a very heavy concentration of oxygen, and it almost looked like a foggy day all the time. And you would heal faster if you were cut. You lived much longer. And once that was destroyed, then weather patterns formed on Earth. And we only have about 12,000 to 14,000 years of erosion on the planet, weather erosion. It doesn't go back any further than that. So this planet is 4 billion years old. And we've got at least, 2 billion years of an ocean with weather. There'd be nothing left but rocks and water. There would be no soil left from the erosion of the rain. And that's very, very clearly documented that we only have about 12,000 years erosion on the planet. So the planet's not that old. The evidence fits into Earth only being formed 12,000 years ago. So that would be roughly about 3 passings of Planet X. I think that one Planet X, during the destruction of Tiamat, everything in its gravity well may have slowed it down because the timeline isn't quite there. It's a little too long, and then it comes back around 7,000 years, forms. Then you have the Great Flood. So you had the catastrophe before that, then you have the Great Flood. And at that point, you have a brand. That's the human we are right now, after Noah. Because Noah was, when he was born, he was supposed to have very light skin, reddish hair, and his eyes seemed to kind of glow. And his father, Lamech, was concerned about this. And he questioned his wife, and she's like, I've not known anyone else but you. And so he went and spoke to his grandfather, which was Enoch, the same one in the Bible who created all the pyramids. So Enoch went and spoke to the sky guardians and then came back and said, do not harm the child. They have, in the best wording they could use, artificially inseminated your wife with this particular child. He is the sort of the prototype of the next race. And those writings were found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. It's called the Book of Lamech. He was the father of Noah. So I find it interesting that sometimes Tom Horn and Steve Quayle will speak of the purity of the line of Noah from Adam and Eve and how the demons keep trying to infiltrate him. You don't realize he was a Nephilim. He was genetically engineered. And it's right there. The information is right there for them to go look at. They just kind of ignore it. It doesn't fit into their little plans.
The Dead Sea Scrolls are fascinating. I've actually got a copy of the newest translations, and if you read the Secret Book of John, I mean, it's got a completely different version of Genesis.
Yeah, and the Book of Enoch wasn't in there. The Book of Enoch was hunted down and destroyed for millennia. They finally thought they'd gotten rid of every copy. And when you actually see the Book of Enoch, you realize that Christ quoted from it quite a bit. It was required reading at that time when Christ was on earth. And they were going to remove the book of Jude from the Bible because he quotes from that book. He says he quotes from the book. And so they were going to remove it since that book was not in existence. But there's several books that are missing. There's the book of the Wars of the Elohim. That book is missing. And I think there's like 9 other books it mentions that are missing, that these were very important books and were not supposed to be destroyed. But there was actually sort of a witch hunt by the Romans who ordered a lot of these documents destroyed. The Book of Enoch says that angels can take form. In other words, they can become human beings. They can be born like human beings, inhabit a body. And they had to destroy that because Christ, if you start looking into the Bible, into the angel of the Lord, the one called the angel of the Lord, when the angel of the Lord is described, this particular angel, and he's always called the angel of the Lord, fits everything Christ did. Everything that Christ later does, this particular angel sort of mimics in advance. So if one of the angel of the Lord came on to Mary, well, that means that he got into the body and he was the one who was born as Christ. And the Book of Enoch describes this as happening. This was what they call the matrix. And that word, I don't ever remember reading that word in the Bible. I've read many, many passages of the Bible, many versions of it, and I never recalled the word matrix being in there. But it's in there 6 times now. You've heard of what's that thing called, the Mandela effect?
Yes, I have.
Well, that's one of the changes to the Bible now. It says matrix, and it's in reference to the woman's womb. I spoke with the author of The Matrix, with Sophia Stewart, and I had always thought it was the Wachowski brothers, but apparently they plagiarized. They plagiarized everything: the name of the book, the name of the characters, everything. Anyway, it took her 6 years in court, but she finally got all her rights back. The Matrix, she explained, is when they created woman, and just one other author has created a book I need to get my hands on. It's on Amazon, and she's describing how when woman was created, they sort of went overboard with the upgrades that they put in woman, because the males were sort of a worker, and that's what Adamu means, worker. But the female, in order for her to have a child with the spirit, the soul from Creator, she has to have a matrix. A matrix is sort of a stargate within the female. And the female, during the gestation period, this matrix sort of gets the signature of the soul that will be in the child. And when it's creating the cells of this body, it is causing the DNA, what we would call junk DNA, to be aligned, tuned, in sync with this soul. So that soul can then inhabit the body, sort of connects like an avatar, and can express itself and be here on Earth. That's what the Matrix is. And so I was really fascinated by what she was explaining it as being. And she also explained that she also wrote the Terminator series, and the Terminator series is actually the first part of the Matrix series. That's how the machines eventually got powerful enough.
I remember several years ago actually talking to her when I was on a different platform, and I read that screenplay that she put together, and it's interesting. It seemed to me like a lot of the information that she got was stuff that you could pull out of Revelation, but that's, and that's just my opinion. But, the one thing that I do notice a lot of is there's so much transhumanism and AI, and even in a lot of the new films now, they are portraying the androids in the TV series Human as being more humane than humans are. And it seems like we're certainly getting a slap in the face, whereas the push is towards this AI construct, which makes you wonder why. Why in the world would we give so much power over to an artificial intelligence and even mentally give away our own rights in a sense?
Well, that was one of her biggest concerns, that these AI will eventually take over. And she's got enough degrees to understand the concept of programming of the AIs. To an AI, we're in a coma. We don't think anywhere near as fast as they do. But AIs aren't alive. They can make decisions, and they can make suggestions, or they can plan things out. But you do recall when they had that big chess game with IBM and Big
Kasparov?
Blue?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. They wouldn't let him see the programming, and there were 6 chess players, masters, back there supposedly counseling these programmers. That's not what was happening.
Right.
Big Blue was just a big box, and these 6 guys were all playing this one chess player. So let's say it was a real AI, IBM won. Okay, where's the technology? What did you do with it? They put it in a box, they put it in mothballs, and they hid it away. They never did anything with it because there was nothing there. There was nothing to Big Blue. It was just a scam. And that's why they wouldn't let them see the printouts. There were no printouts. And basically it was just a bunch of chess masters playing the one chess master, and IBM getting a lot of publicity for it.
I'm glad you brought that up.
That's what the evidence seems to point to. So with the Catholic Church, the work I was doing, I had grown up Roman Catholic, and I had wanted to be a priest, an exorcist for the Roman Catholic Church, but they were doing away with the exorcists at the time, so I ended up leaving the church. But Father Malachi Martin, he spoke on this a few times, but he was fairly certain that whatever this was something that comes from space, something that's approaching Earth. And he got a chance to read the actual prophecy, the third prophecy, and he vehemently stated that was not it. He read it, and that was not what they released. They've never released the third prophecy of Fatima. But the church became concerned because it's spoke of something coming from the cosmos and causing great destruction coming into the solar system. So they're supposed to have a satellite that NASA launched for them, flying out in that direction towards Orion to look for this thing. And they also have that one telescope they have over in Italy, and they've got that new one they built on Mount Graham. This one's the only one of its kind. It's a binocular, so there's two specific scopes that are looking in the infrared region, and these are theoretical. They're first of their kind, and they named the thing Lucifer. So they're looking for this object to be coming from the southern hemisphere. They know it's there. They know it's coming, and they've also been rewriting the Gospels. A new version will be coming out, and it will include, I guess, the Anunnaki in it, because they're definitely tied in to everything that happened to Christ during the crucifixion. The tie to Planet X and the Exodus, many researchers have already figured out that that's when it came by. We were talking about Meade a little while ago, and his dating of 3800 BC is about 200 years off. And I explained to him, you've got Venus in there. In your calculations, take Venus out, because Venus would have just kind of been a rogue planet at that time, wouldn't have been settled into position yet. And calculate the time, you'll come up closer to 3,600 years. And I also discovered that because this disk he was talking about, the Nebra sky disk, that green disk that has gold stars on it, it's actually brass with gold inlay. That disk, it pretty much is a star observatory. They've got this one circle on one side, half circle, then another half circle on the other horizon, and they're about 72 degrees apart, so you can see where the moon would, or the sun would go as far as it could in one horizon during this, say, summer, and then it moves in the other direction to the other equinox in the wintertime, and you'll see the limit of where the sun would go, or where it would rise and where it would set. So we have one on the east and west horizon. Stonehenge is similar, and there's several others throughout the world that are similar. I believe these were earning systems, and the reason I believe that is because you could check every year at that time when the equinoxes were supposed to be coming, and you would see that the sun rose exactly where it's supposed to. Once you saw the sun was out of position, then you would know to start preparing for the return of the thing. And WSO, the Wormwood Systems observers, they noted that the sun was off by 17 degrees during the winter solstice. It's supposed to be at a specific location on the horizon. It was not. Also, the other day, 2 months ago, I walked out of the front porch here. It faces the back porch, but it was completely lit up. And I'm looking around, where's the light coming from? And it was the moon. It was lighting up the entire north wall. The moon has never done that. Never been that far north that it could do that. And the moon was way out of position. So that's kind of this object coming in. The Earth is wobbling, and the contact that I have with the off-worlders, they're trying to keep the planet from going over into a pole shift. The poles are both moving very fast right now. The one in the north, of course, everybody knows about that one. But the one in the south is already into the water. It's off of the mainland of Antarctica, and it's moving north. It's already in the ocean. And both of them, at the speed they're headed, they should meet in the Indian Ocean at a location where there was a buoy, where suspicious observers noted that the surface, or the base of the ocean, rose nearly 1,000 meters in one day. And it did it again. I think it was 600 meters the next day. And then that buoy was pulled offline. But that's the location that both poles are headed to. So if they keep the speed that they're going, they both meet up there. South Pole's traveling slower than the North Pole is. And the object in the North Pole, that one has a shaped magnetic field. They're trying to hold the northern pole in that position, and another one, the southern pole. And they've also been removing all the asteroids, but too many are starting to get through. You've probably heard of a few asteroids striking here and there. You'll hear more. They're not getting them all out of the way. We will be getting hit. Mars is getting hit the moon is getting hit. And if you recall Napolitano, when she left she was in charge of security, she mentioned that she was resigning because of the catastrophe that was about to happen. She said it would be cosmic in nature. Woolsey, the CIA director, said something very similar. And what she was describing was these asteroid strikes. Now, we should have got them already. It's just that they've been moving the really big ones out of the way. And the reason they're doing this is because of what humanity is and what humanity has done. And we look around, we don't see any major progress. If anything, we see we've lost a lot of ground. But on another show, I mentioned that Dolores Cannon has spoken of these 3 waves of volunteers that had come to Earth to try and change the outcome of the world, because 850 years into the future, there's great destruction across the galaxy. And it's basically caused because of Earth, because of some tyrannical things that happen on Earth. And you can imagine the Galactic Empire in Star Wars, something along those lines combined with the New World Order, controlling the entire galaxy. There'd be no way to get around it, because they would have birthing centers, and at these centers they would eliminate the individuals that had a higher frequency rate, I guess, more spiritual. They're already doing that, from what I understand. There's people who monitor the baby rooms, and they will eliminate the child. And that's why you have these people called walk-ins. Someone will be born in the child, and they'll grow up to a certain age, and then they leave the body, and the walk-in comes in, so that they weren't eliminated at birth. I don't know if you ever heard of walk-ins before.
I have, actually. We did a show the other day where I talked to one of the guests, and they brought up the walk-ins. That's a fascinating subject.
Well, that's why they do that, to keep from getting eliminated at the birthing stations. So one thing that I found fascinating about the Exodus, not only that it matched everything that took place, the timing, the cloud that they said they were under when they were walking in the desert, because once the Santorini caldera went off, which is something like the Yellowstone caldera, it would have caused a cloud about 18 months long, a dark cloud of ash that would have prevented the sun from shining through very brightly. You could see the sun, but you would not be able to get a shadow from the sun. And when this happened again in the year 535, which plunged the earth into the Dark Ages, the diaries of that time speak of the sun coming out for about 4 hours, but you could not see your shadow. And everything tasted horrible. This powder, this dust landed on the water. And they got to drinking beer a lot at that time, and the wine that they had, and had to dig up new wells, new springs. But it set the world back considerably into the Dark Ages. They just weren't prepared. They didn't have that kind of food stores. The church did, because they were demanding 10% of your crop. So any royalty that survived that would have owed an allegiance to the church. And then the church pretty much rewrote everything on the planet. Now we were on a flat earth, and they were the intermediaries between the Creator and us. And they were going to be reading it all in Latin. So that was a system of control that lasted for a very long time. And the Exodus, getting back to the Exodus, when it took place, it would appear that Moses is not completely Israelite. According to the Jews, Moses is 100% Israelite. He was moved along the trusses of the water in that little floating basket, and then one of the, was she a sister of Pharaoh or whatever, and he picked him up. But in the actual history of it, it turns out that the word Moses means rightful heir to the throne. Moses was the son of the Pharaoh. Now, the wife that he had, she was an Israelite princess, so Moses was half Israelite. But in order to hide this information, the Jews changed the timing of Exodus, moved it forward 400 years, and distanced themselves from Moses, who was the brother of Moses, the Pharaoh at the time of the Exodus. And then they pretty much kept everything else intact. All the stories, the destruction of Jericho, everything else remained that way. Just that the timing was off. All the dates were off. But that didn't bother them. It was a small matter. However, when they found Jericho, when they finally discovered it, they were amazed that it existed at all, because it was something that was in the Bible, and they didn't really believe that was a documented history. And what fascinated them was that Jericho was destroyed exactly the way the Bible said it was destroyed. The walls were sort of collapsed in on themselves. And inside there, if people had like stone jewelry or whatever they're wearing, that they were still wearing it. The gold was missing. The precious metals, all their food stores, everything was intact. Nothing had been taken. So they surmised that the Jews must have seen it as they came out. They must have come across Jericho, and then they put it into their storyline, saying that they had destroyed it, taking credit for it, because the destruction 50 years earlier than what the Jews said was their Exodus in 1250 BC. So roughly the time of the last passing of Nibiru, which would have been 1550 BC. Right in that time frame. And I found that fascinating. And the reason, again, they did it, because this is their most important prophet. You can't have him being half Egyptian. So they changed all that around. And